And we have a special guest coming here in a few moments, so we'll give them time to get together. Michael picked up Peter last night at the airport around 12:30 or 1 o'clock, and then they were at the archery range at 6:30, so they've had a short night, but they've had a lot of processing, so they're going to share with us here in a few minutes. They just got back in the door just like 2 minutes ago. So in the meantime, go to whyagain.org, and you can click on a lot of information, but if you go up to the top, there is a little link that will take you to, I'm getting a back feed here, hold on. There's a link that will take you to our YouTube channel. And I'm going to be behind this week, but we have been putting all of the radio shows as they get converted to MP4s and putting them up on the YouTube channel so you can pick them up there, and that will expand our presence. And click like and follow us, and we would appreciate it. I'm going to welcome Michael to the show. Oh, he said give him just a minute. I was sitting here. I didn't go with him to the archery tournament today. I plan on going tomorrow, but I've been sitting here editing all morning on my books, and I've been getting a whole lot done, so I'm excited about that. And anyway, I'm just waiting on the guys to get it together here. But okay, Michael just gave me a thumbs up.
And delighted to be here, everybody. Thank you for joining us. And we had a very short night last night, and I picked Peter up, who came in to do both an archery competition and to do the Quantum Stillpoint Intensive. And yesterday morning, Peter's Quantum Stillpoint Intensive started when he missed his airplane due to a little snafu in Sweden. And he reorganized all of that, made it in about 1 o'clock this morning. As you said, we were up and getting ready to head to the competition at 6:30. And as a result of the amount of processing that happened, I put forward, we were planning to play a show today, but I put forward the thought to Peter that perhaps we could just bounce back and forth some of what he's going through, some of what's happening, some of the principles of the work, some of the principles of Quantum Stillpoint. And so he'll be with us in a minute or two. And in the meantime, Jeanie, do we have anybody in the phone queue with a hand up or anything happening in the chat room?
No, it's all quiet.
So if you're out there in listener land, while there's an opportunity, perhaps Peter's going to be a minute or two. He, of course, had a very short night and then did the last several hours of archery competition. And so he said before he jumps in on the radio show, he's going to go take a cold shower. So that's what Peter's in the middle of doing. So until he gets here, if you're out there and listening, and you have a thought, a question for us, calling number 563-999-3581. If you call that number, you're listening to the show directly. And if you push 1, you have a comment or a question, that will raise a hand in the control panel, and Jeanie will introduce you by the area code. And Peter just walked into the room. So I just did a brief introduction, Peter, telling folks about your opportunities and missing your airline flight and getting in at 1 o'clock this morning and getting up and heading to the archery range at 6:30, the place where sin and evil take place. An interesting conversation about those Aramaic words, and then the process that you went through. I just shared that, talk to you about whether you might just have a conversation about what's moving, what's up for Peter, and how do you be. So everybody has heard Peter on the show before, I'm sure. Peter Strinnell from Sweden, Malmo, Sweden, and so So I'm going to turn it over to you, Peter. What's on your mind?
Yeah, like I said, I don't even know where to start. So it probably needs to be question-based.
Okay.
There's just so much stuff moving so rapidly, from the point of doing rather good and then to the next, like, just the next layer coming up.
Your intensive has begun.
Very much so, yeah.
Well, it was pretty awesome, the Stillpoint session that you had yesterday afternoon. We
Yes.
had our conversation, did a full Stillpoint breathing session over the phone from Sweden, and on an airplane, and back in tonight or this morning. And to watch your process, maybe you could share a little bit about how perfect a mind shifter you had today with the fact that you're on the archery range. One of the comments that I made was that this being up there in a competition was so perfect as mind shifter. And you remember, mind shifter is usually something that we do in writing, thought, about something that brings up negative thoughts and the opportunities to process, surface, and release the negative thoughts. And so, maybe share a little bit about how archery was one of the root circumstances which brought some of these issues around for you. Our person dynamic.
Can you just remind me of the mindset?
Well, just how Dad was involved in archery, and some of the issues that here you get on the archery range and it's in your face. And of course, here I am, substitute Dad, sitting there.
Yeah, just coming home to the house now with Jeanie being here, and that was a very strong sensation of coming home to Mom having failed again, because that's it's been going up and down during the whole day during the archery, but the main stems from the archery itself is that it's a failure today. Had it not been that I've got in touch with a lot of stuff that I hold within, I mean, that victory, but it feels like a failure. And noticing now coming home to Mom, it's like, and I told Michael in the car coming here that tears were welling up because once again I failed. I hadn't fixed the world today either. And I had some thwarted, I think you can say, toward the belief system that if I am, for instance, archery, if I'm doing it really, really good, then I will fix Mom and Dad, fix everything, fix the world.
And of course, as a kid, Mom and Dad is pretty much our world, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah. And in the context of that, Peter has a son who's now 28. And right, time flies. So that means it was 26 years ago, 28 years ago, that you came to Heartland. And in the context of this reality surfacing for Peter called failure, which is an old dad reality, I asked the question of Peter to go back when your son was 1 year of age. One of the mind shifters that I'd offered Peter in the context of this conversation about failure was I offered that your presence is enough. And Peter's response was,
that's a hoax.
That's a hoax. And so I simply asked the question. So think back to when Elliot was a year and arms open, big grin on his face, running towards you. Was his presence enough? Did you need any more from him? Were there demands from him?
No, definitely not.
So which is the hoax? I'm a failure, I can't do enough, I'm not fixing the world, or my presence is enough, do you suppose?
Presence is enough.
And then the other conversation we had was recognizing the powerful line from A Course in Miracles, that we must understand the distorting power of the way we want it to be. I want to have a purpose for something. That purpose is a starting point. Pardon me. And in conjunction with goals for the construct my mind is going to create. And when I change my purpose, perception, that construct changes totally and completely. And when you realize all the variables, you realize how many fantasies the human mind offers us that are nothing more than fantasies. And one of the ways you can tell that your mind is caught in a fantasy is that there's some form of hostility or fear in it. And you know, whenever that's true, that your mind's working from corrupt data, and whatever it's doing, it's a lie. It can be so difficult to give up a lie because generation upon generation upon generation upon generation have held on to those lies like they are life itself. In fact, they're death.
And having experienced, like now you were there watching, it was 12 rounds, and it shifted from round to round. There were moments where that was given up and everything was wonderful. Coming from shooting really well. And then quickly too quickly, there's a new thought entering. I did a really good round, and immediately I started to think that, oh, now I can do this every time, and now it's going to be really great. And all of a sudden, like you say, they have a new purpose. There's a new thought coming up.
I need to win.
Now, I'm thinking of how well this can be. I mean, I will really outshine. And then everything went to pieces. I could feel my physiology change.
That was going to be my question. Share with our listeners. I think this is really powerful observation and inspiration. As you were paying attention to your body totally told you what was energetically operating in your mind. If you could expand on that idea a little bit.
It's an instant. The 6-hour round that I did so well, that was just after we had a break. So Michael and I have been talking for that 10 minutes or so. And getting up on the shooting line, I did really good. And this is a goal that I realized when I was in the shower. I had 57 for those 6 hours, and if I do that all along, then I will beat the world record.
And you're back in the competition game.
I will beat the world record if I keep that all along, and that's what got me. Because if I take the world record, imagine how good I am then. And then there must be a lot of love available. At least that's what somewhere the mind says.
So that becomes a whole intricate story as to why your presence isn't enough.
Yeah.
And that's the game of the mind.
And like you were saying, when I shot that really good round, it was just total ease, total like a breeze. Having done this so many times of shooting, I know my body, I know my form, totally effortless, totally with ease. And then as soon as that thought came, And even though I was aware of it, that I was thinking of getting the world record, that as soon as that thought entered my mind, I lost being, and I could clearly feel how my physiology shifted. You were talking about resistance. I could clearly feel my form of archery and my whole body shifting, and it didn't work. I couldn't do what I did just 3 minutes.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, it was in that intermission, or it actually might have been a little bit earlier, that one of the goals you had been looking at, a whole raft of goals and canceling them. One of them was cancel the need to be in the competition. Just be like a 4-year-old playing.
Mm.
Yeah, that's also a hope. That's not really. I hear you, and
Our base memory says no.
because then how am I going to prove that I'm good? Again.
What if there's nothing to prove? That truth about Peter is just that of not being lovable, but actually being the presence of love. And there's nothing to prove. At what point, and we talked about how many of the goals that you've held in regard to Dad got passed on to Elliot. How many of those goals operate between you and Elliot? And you easily remembered a point where at one, there were no goals for him and being was enough. At what point did you start to fill those goals, make those demands, pass on good old family feeling? And at what point do we give it up?
I don't know how to answer that. It's just so tiring. Just so tiring. Oh,
Nobody can carry that load for a lifetime.
human doing.
In the context of what's surfacing now, and for audience, I'll just describe your physiology. Your arms are down on the table and your face is down on your arm. Tears are coming. And what if you allowed, in the context of that, yourself to tap into the moment where, as with Elliot, there was no demand. It was needed because that's everything. Breathe into that one. Well, can you imagine Peter being 1 year? There were no demands whatsoever. Just that grinning, smiling face was all that was required.
And that is the sensation of chasing. And I'm chasing it by doing.
Trying to accomplish it rather than be it.
Yep. That's the
In the context of that conversation as we were driving up to the house, I shared how much Aria has taught me. How, and she's 5, she'll be 6 next month. And just looking at that face is all that's required. That presence, that being.
I shared my favorite Heartland story, my personal favorite Heartland story last time, 2019. The Elliot was 1.5 years maybe. Yes. bed. He was sitting naked, and we had a Donald Duck cup from you with magnets that you could put letters with on the fridge, and he was just fiddling around with them, and I was sitting there just drying him up and remembering having a conversation in my head. What are you looking at this beautiful being? And he placed into it.
Notice where any resistance is. Slide it soft. Your hands, your toes, forehead. Loose tight.
He placed the letter G, and then there was like 30 letters. And
I remember this now.
he placed the letter U, but he did not feel like he was writing. He was just placing one letter, and then it was bringing out another letter, U, and then it was B, and that's how you spell God in Swedish.
Yeah. Yep, who is this being? There you go. There's your answer. And then, as this conversation taking place, we're pulling up to the door. I start to pull in the driveway, and about 15 feet from the car, there's a deer standing there looking at it.
They're really standing there.
Yeah. And you shared message of the deer that you realized was for you.
As I remember, for the medicine cards, the deer stands for gentleness.
Another G word.
So yes, I know that you're asking that 1-year-old. I know that's available. And then the mind is so quick. Oh, tuning fork, yeah.
And, you know, one of the things that I've discovered in walking people through terrors and traumas, probably, you know, one of the grossest I can think of is almost 40 years ago, I was doing a workshop in New York State. There's a guy who had not very much earlier come back from Vietnam. And he got into doing drugs in Vietnam, was stoned out of his mind, and he was on nighttime guard duty, manning machine gun, watching for planes coming in, enemies, all that. And he shot down a plane that was coming in. It was his own men. And his, whatever commanding officer, made him clean up the bodies, everybody. And even in the context of that, being shows up, it's still being lives in a different energy realm. And when you make the space for it, of course, talks about a clean and open space within. It's always new, always shiny, that's all. Just the pure presence of love. Doesn't mean there's no memory of horrific things that have happened. But in the context of that is a dissolution of everything. sunlight. And Jean Rampage says, hold on, she's on. Hey, Jean. Glad you're here to hold the space for this young man. Could push one and say something if you like. Hey, Jean.
Oops.
Your voice is enough. You have anything to share, Jean?
Oh, shoot.
Go ahead, Jean. We got you.
Yeah, I'm here.
Well, we're glad you are.
Unfortunately, I'm having trouble with my phone, so I can barely hear you. But, Peter, I'm right here with you.
For those who aren't aware of it, Jean was at Heartland 2 or 3 times when Peter was there many years ago, and they've worked together and studied together. So it's awesome how support shows up. And probably just because you deserve it. because your being is enough.
Yeah, that's a mind shifter that Michael showed me during the competition.
Yeah.
Where he said something when I failed.
So I had sent Peter a mind shifter at one of the points where his stuff was up during the archery competition. And he came back and said, I failed really miserably. And so I sent him the mind shifter. The more miserably I fail, the more people are there for me holding the space for healing.
Thank you, Jean.
Oh, you're welcome, my dear. Always.
That's probably welcome and deserving, right?
Absolutely.
What's happening for you, Jeannie?
This homeless space.
I'm sorry I couldn't understand.
Peter's just breathing very deeply right now. I think the vitality you just brought into the space just opened another whole layer for him.
Well, let's keep going.
Easy for her to say, right, Peter? She's not the one on the hot seat.
Yes, I agree.
But it's like the same like the other day when Michael was supporting me, that even is available for me, love and support. But I don't have to do anything. We're talking about failing, and then we're talking about love and support. It's like we talk about resistance now. The neck is like.
So what I hear you saying is when you were a kid, your support was conditional.
At least I interpret it that way.
Yeah.
Oh, big time.
So notice that was the past.
You don't get anything if you don't do. Definitely not love and support. Then, yeah.
So how can you transfer that offering to Elliot?
I'll be there for him. So that's where I think.
Yeah. And it's a practice. You know, when we didn't receive it, when there was no modeling for it, didn't seem natural or normal or even possible. And so when you bring it through, at first it can seem very strange. You know, it's like if we were in the live classroom and had the whiteboard up in front, I'd ask you to come up and write your name with your non-dominant hand and see how that felt. When you start to bring in something new like that, like writing with your non-dominant hand, wait a minute, this feels awkward, this is not, oh, there's something wrong with this. Like, just haven't been there, done that before. And as you do it, it just becomes first nature, because it is your first nature. It's the first nature of all of us. And the world's tricked us into something else. And what it's tricked us into is just pure garbage.
Because that's the thing that my mind was screaming before, even before Jean came on, about why is it so hard? Why is it so elusive? That is what we are, and still the experience is, I know that, I have experienced it last 2 days ago. Like I told you, when I was experiencing Stillpoint, I was in a room with both Elliot and Tanya, and I was all in the processing, so I didn't see them, but I sensed them, and I just felt like I was back at Heartland, where Elliot, I then had the picture of you that you're talking about, Elliot being, and then
He's less than two, and he's doing energy field work on everybody in the room.
Yeah. and
up at the board teaching at 2.
So I know it, I've experienced it, and yet it is seemingly with the mind. It does. I lose the mind.
Well, you've experienced it, but the you that exists in your mind that you think of yourself as that isn't you hasn't experienced it yet. And that's what steps up. That's when resonance and that moves, it takes over. And that's the self that Yeshua said, in order for you being to live, you non-being, this non-being self has to die. It has to be dismantled, has to go. And that's the work. Otherwise, as long as that non-being self remains intact and we refuse to face it, refuse to bring its unconscious dynamics forward in the presence of love and forgive it, that is, remove it, then whenever it's resonated into activity, it takes over. And you can't say, okay, I'm just not going to do that anymore, because as the example I used earlier at the archery field, you know, if I take a middle C tuning fork and I hit it on a desk and I put it near a second middle C tuning fork that's standing still, that second middle C tuning fork has no choice whatsoever whether it's going to move. It's just a pure energy exchange. I put that moving tuning fork near it and the second tuning fork moves. If there's any remnant of hostility or fear left in my tissue structure, then when something that matches that energy shows up, whether it's a goal, a circumstance, a situation, a word, a look, maybe just the way somebody takes a breath. Like, anybody ever turn the breath on you? And that's all it takes to trigger that into activity. And when it's triggered into activity, that's when it can be most powerfully forgiven, removed. Not let off the hook, but literally energetically removed. And that's the self that has to die. And that's really the bulk of the work that needs to be done. Because that self is not just based on what my experiences were and what my power person did, but it's based on 1,000 generations of power and dynamics. Right, Jean?
Amen. Do you think that self ever dies? I mean, I've been shaking my finger at myself, little self, for a long time, and doing over 30 years of this stuff. And I often wonder, if I decide to leave this earth, if the little self is left behind.
Well, my take is that each time you apply forgiveness to the dynamics that underlie that false self, the literal energetic structure of the false self weakens. And it weakens and weakens and weakens to the point where I'm tapped into being, and it's resonating into activity, and I fall into its craziness, and it's nuts, and I just get lost.
Yes.
And I do the next piece of work when it's up, and the next piece, and it's a little weaker, and the emotional meter has to get a little higher on the scale before it takes over, you know. In the early days, all it takes is a level 2 movement of energy in that non-being mind for it to take over and for me to go blotto, literally go unconscious. But as I do the work and I weaken its structure, you know, the emotional meter has to go to a 7 before it can take over. I do my next piece of work, it has to go to an 8. And then there comes a point where it's just a kind of a faded memory. It's in brain cells. I can remember it, but it has no control anymore, because through the action of forgiveness, and I am so grateful that this man Yeshua 2,000 years ago came along and showed us how to forgive it, how to remove it, how to weaken it. And that's the whole idea of the reality management worksheet process.
Well,
and then
that is
no matter what goes on in the world, it's just a faded memory.
Mm. That is a great impetus to continue doing the work daily. I started one worksheet a day. Again, Peter and I were doing that for a while. I don't know, at one time we tried doing 5 a day, and that was a challenge, but it was so worthwhile. And now I'm getting back into 1 a day. I'll work my way up to 5.
Good start.
But yes, and I applaud you, Peter, for doing the copious amounts of work you've done over the years. You, to me, are a completely different person than when I met you, and I hope you could say the same about me. I believe our hearts are the same, but the way we react, we're continuously realizing that this is about us. My reaction is about me. And if you ever want anybody to bring up your stuff, just join a card group. I've got ladies in this group. Boy, oh boy, what a gift. And I come home and I do a worksheet and I go back for more. So I just applaud you. You are one of the handful of people that I know you just keep going. Good for you.
So there you go, Peter. You've gotten the acknowledgement and the approval you wanted. Now, are we finished now? Can we just call it?
As soon as Jean now started to give the acknowledgement,
The thing you've always wanted, yeah. As soon as she started to give it to you,
I started to cry immediately. It was just, I couldn't. It was just...
Breathe into it. That's where the work is. That's the self that needs to be demolished.
So thank you, Jean, and that's what I've been saying. With you say you go back to that lady and do some more in that group. That's kind of with the archery for me, being my muse in the sense of bringing up fear, especially the fear. I mean, the terror is so palpable. It's like taking me over completely. And go back for more.
And that's the power person dynamic that needs to be dissolved. You know, that dynamic runs the whole world, literally.
And the
Michael
word
did say
for me, go ahead.
No, you go.
The word for me is always next. All right, we did that one. All right, next. I mean, because I've got a bottomless bucket here. It's like, in the beginning, I was like, oh my gosh, how much more of this do I need? Am I done? Can there another week? I've been doing it for 2 years. Am I done? And now it's over 30, and I realize I'm nowhere near done. Now, Peter, would you be willing? We talked about this week, you and I. Would you be willing to share that little story of when you were at the Heartland and they were asking everybody when they started their worksheets?
Yeah, I don't remember the question. You were the one remembering the question, but you shared that with me, and I remember the answer. And yeah, I lost my worksheet virginity with Jean in a hotel in bed. And it was December 1994.
Oh, look how memorable!
How memorable. Losing the virginity, how memorable.
Almost 30 years ago.
Yeah, that's what we said. We're coming up on 30-year anniversary.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I almost could admit it's been about 30 years. Good for you. Good for you.
Good for you.
Always get a kick. I get a kick out of it. And I said, that is the shortest story in like 2 sentences. Yeah. Yeah. And we keep going. Yep.
So do you. Thank you.
You're welcome, my dear. And how does it feel? Have you competed yet, or just done the practice round?
No, I missed practice day because I missed the flight. That's a whole other long story.
Okay.
That's a whole other opportunity to learn forgiveness.
She wasn't on the phone when Michael said Peter got in like at 1 o'clock this morning and then was out on the field at 7 o'clock this morning. So
oh my goodness.
He's been under a stressful situation for a couple of days. His intensive started, 3 days ago? And I'm just proud of you that you came on. A lot of people would have just said, well, shoot, this isn't going to work. I'll just stay home. But you were willing to come on. And, you know, to me, the archery is secondary. You're here to do it intensive.
Yes, I agree.
Well, it is.
I agree.
I talked to Michael about this as well, that the archery, the muse thing, but the primary thing is, this, doing the intensive. And that's not only now, but doing that the whole time.
Right.
Bringing up everything I like love, because that is what it's doing.
Yeah.
Big time. So I missed, me and Elliot missed the flight on the Wednesday because of my mind was sharing that it was saying that it was a mistake, a royal screw up. And I didn't want to go back home and meet Tanya. And I told Michael this, and then that's when he, whoa, listen to that regulatory speech, because when I came home, stepped into the door with me and Ellie coming back from the airport, having failed getting on the flight, I stood, got down on my knees, and I said to Tanya, slap me, behead me.
Oh, my.
Because that's where I was coming from. That I had failed so hard that there was like no turning back. There was nothing The only thing was beheaded.
You came on.
I came on.
This morning your neck and shoulders were still in trauma.
Yeah, and now again, immediately it's coming up again. Yeah, that was a heavy-duty stillpoint session being done over the phone. Michael and Jeanie was with me, and then I was in the room at home with Tanya and Elliot. So that was the whole.
And it sounds like they held the space really nicely for you there.
They did, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's monumental.
Pretty monumental.
Yes. Nice work.
Those Vikings were pretty brutal.
Yeah, you know those Swedes. Woo.
And I believe it was, whether you categorize it as a generational memory or past life memory, that's exactly what was being processed.
Mm-hmm.
At one point, Peter had said that in their first try, they must have missed my head because my shoulder's in excruciating pain.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe it was a memory. And they're the kind of things that need to be processed to ultimately be free of carbon-based memory.
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts for you, Jeanie?
No, I'm just, I've been editing on my book, which is basically started with what I think was whether it was a past lifetime or a genetic memory or whatever, but dealing with, sexual abuse and how it followed into this lifetime, and pretending like it didn't happen for 40 years didn't make, like my hips hurt and my legs hurt, and, pretending like it didn't happen and I didn't have to face it, didn't have to tell anybody. I mean, it's like until I started writing the book and started talking to Michael about what my stillpoint session was and everything, I hadn't mentioned it to anybody what had happened in my lifetime. And so, we have to deal with it or it's going to show up, it's going to manifest physically.
Until the unconscious becomes conscious, it will run our lives, and we will call it fate. Carl Young.
Yeah, that's the line I'm thinking of that Michael shared several times from Yeshua. Then I have nothing of that in my store.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
And again, that sounds like a hoax. It sounds unfathomable, and still, that is the thing that moves, that keeps coming back again and again, because I believe that somewhere that is available, that there is, the being is underneath all this.
Yeah.
So keep on going until none of that is my store.
Yeah.
That's exactly. That's the whole objective of the work.
And I just have to take your word for it, or
Watch your experiment. You'll know for yourself.
Well, it is easier to take his word for it, but it'll crop up if we don't do the work. That's just the bottom line. And I am eternally grateful to Peter and I have talked about this many times. What in the world would our lives look like with no tools? I probably would be angry and not well and all the rest of the stuff, but the tools,
just turn on the news.
Yes.
Just turn on the news and just look at politics. You know what your life is like.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And for me, it boggles my mind when I think about the fact that 2,000 years ago, this man Yeshua said, hey, here's how it works. Here are the tools. Here's how to do it. And that all just got shoved aside. And, our work now is to try to restore that to people's awareness, because there's no need to do the why is this happening to me again experience it. We've got the tools. But without them, there's nothing else to do.
And I think the world changes one person at a time. I mean, you know, we could do a lot of shifting with breath work and groups, but it's a commitment to each one of us to do the work, to change the energy in the world. And I'm confident over the centuries, the week, the months, whatever, it can happen.
I don't know if you were on
around,
so
but
you'll be around.
Go ahead. Oh, wouldn't that be nice? I'm waiting for the 100th monkey.
Aha. Well, let's be the 100th monkey. I came across a quote, and I've been writing on the Quantum Stillpoint, and this is actually the opening of the Quantum Stillpoint, and it's another quote from Carl Jung. I had not heard it before. I was doing some research on how to understand and explain the Quantum Stillpoint, and Carl Jung said this: the healer is not just working for a particular patient, but for him or herself, as well as his or her own soul. And in so doing is perhaps laying an infinitesimal grain in the scales of humanity's soul. Small and invisible as this contribution may be, it is yet an opus magnum.
Mm-hmm.
Each person does the work, changes the whole game for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So to me, that's why we need to get enough people through the gate, because it's time for this insanity to be done. And when I think about these awesome grandkids and giving them a chance at something different, whatever it takes to do, I'm up for doing it.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I often tell the story of my first time at Heartland, and I did a lot of work around my older daughter, and we were at odds most of our lives together. And I had asked her if she wanted to come with me to Heartland, and she was not interested. And when I came back and she came over, she walked in the door with her arms open wide and said, "Mom!" and just came running towards me and put her arms around me. That had never happened in her life or my life. And boy, that made me a believer that when we change the generations. When I change, my daughter changes, my grandchildren, and that is an encouragement for me to keep doing it. Plus, I feel better. I feel like I'm doing something for a lot of people. And
exactly.
they watch me by example. And I mean, they grew up with this stuff for breakfast. And, I'll say, well, that sounds like worksheet material. Now, whether they do it, I know my older daughter doesn't. My younger daughter might. And that's encouraging, because we all need to come to it on our own. I mean, I can't push them and shove them and do this, and that's not going to work. So I live one day at a time, and hopefully see enough of it or have an impetus to change their lives. And that's thrilling for me, thrilling. So that's why I get up in the morning.
I'm with you.
Besides saying next, you know, what is the day going to be like? Yep. Well, Peter, you did get on the plane, correct? You did get on the plane, correct?
We'll get on the plane.
Yeah.
Okay. And his competition.
He's sitting right here with us.
So are you in Virginia?
No, we're in Ohio. I was at the archery range with him this morning.
Okay.
And we're back at the house and we're getting ready to do the next level of our quantum stillpoint process after Peter has a nap.
Okay, I bet. Boy. And when is your competition?
First day we've done today, and then it's going to be tomorrow, and then the day after that.
Okay. All right. Terrific.
So rock and roll.
I am excited for you.
Well, we are too.
Everything. Yep. Oh my! What a morning.
We hold the space that you get the tail end of the energy that gives you a boost to the next level in your process as well.
Well, thank you. I'm waiting.
Delighted. All right, well, holding you in a blessing, and the show's gonna shut us off any second, so I'm just gonna say, everybody, thanks for joining us. Have the best year yet of your eternal life. It is an awesome gift.